Welcome back to CVM Live. It's now time for our major stories in detail. Organized criminal networks beefing up of the national border security. There are just two of the areas the National Security Minister has emphasized in the government's ongoing efforts in fighting crime. Following on his presentation in Parliament, the Minister stressed these points when he appeared on CVM Live's panel discussion on Wednesday. Our reporter Joel Croskill has that story. We apologize for after the insert. We'll get back to that story later on in our news. Well, the rape case involving popular entertainer Capleton, whose real name is Clifton Bailey, has been put off until next month. Capleton was accompanied by his manager Claudette Kemp and other close associates to the Kingston and St. Andrew Parish Court. The scenes outside the court were not much different than when he made his first appearance on May 14, with supporters lingering on the outside, some decked out in the colors indicative of their Rastafarian beliefs. Capleton, whose name is Clifton Bailey, was charged with rape on May 11. The allegations are that the 51-year-old artiste had a hairdresser who went to a hotel in New Kingston on April 28 to groom his hair. According to the police, the woman claims that while there he held her down and had sexual intercourse with her against her will. But still on court matters, the charges brought against Antiguan football coach 49-year-old Derek Edwards and his co-accused 48-year-old equipment coordinator Danny Benjamin have been dropped. The men were charged with possession of ganja, dealing in ganja and taking steps preparatory to exporting ganja and conspiracy. Here is CVM Live's court reporter Nicole Wilson.
Equipment coordinator Danny Benjamin with Antiguan football coach Derek Edwards following closely behind as they made their way back into the Kingston and St. Andrew Parish Court on Tuesday morning. The pair is charged with possession of ganja, dealing in ganja, taking steps preparatory to export ganja, and conspiracy. Benjamin and Edwards were arrested at the Norman Manley International Airport in Kingston on March 26. The police say it was after a search of their luggage that they discovered 3.6 pounds of ganja. The trial, which was set to commence on Tuesday, was transferred to another court after presiding Judge Jacqueline Wilcott recused herself from the matter. The matter was then brought before Judge Broderick Smith, where a new trial date was requested. There was a noticeable change in the body language of both accused, who were sitting in the dock when the new date was requested. The trial date was subsequently set for June 14. Judge Smith also heard two applications from the defense. One was for the use of a DVD with footage from the hotel the men were staying as a part of their defense, while the other was for the removal of the curfew from the bail conditions. Both applications were successful. Nicole Wilson, CVM Live.
And on to another story CVM Live is tracking. Family members of 7-year-old Easton Stapleton, along with the school administration at the Anchovy Primary School, are still mourning the loss of the grade 2 student, whose life was cut short under tragic circumstances on the school compound. More from Khadija Thomas.
Scenes of compassion on the grounds of the Anchovy Primary School as a father bemoans the loss of his only child and the school mourns the loss of a promising student. Images from Tuesday afternoon still fresh in the minds of many Jamaicans. 7-year-old Easton Stapleton killed when a teacher who was reversing her motor vehicle lost control and hit the boy while he was picking up his school bag. The injuries to his neck and face were deadly.
He's a jovial child. He's not one of those children, you know, that would give him trouble to the extent. But he was mannered, very mannered, well-mannered. But he's going to be missed.
Easton Stapleton Sr. was alerted to the incident by a phone call that no parent wants to get.
He's fun-loving, he likes to play, you know. We take him to the beach, he likes to go to the beach. And he likes to read when he's around me because I'll be outside doing something and he'll read aloud. I make him read aloud so I can hear him and know that he's, you know, he likes to watch cartoon. He likes Batman and Superman and all of that, just like any other kids.
Others remain saddened by Tuesday's freak accident. Religious groups on hand to lend support, prior the best comfort.
We also had a chance to visit the mother, who is in the Belmont community, one of the areas I've pastored. And certainly the show of support has been good, very good so far.
We just keep praying to the Lord for strength, and we know that He will give us the strength to carry on.
Khadija Thomas for CVM Live.
Local Government Minister Desmond McKenzie prepared the members of the St. Catherine Municipal Corporation for some of the initiatives that will be coming on stream in short order, including the repair of 3 roads in the constituency. Here's Joel Croskill with the report.
Minister of Local Government Desmond McKenzie ran through a slew of issues that affect local governance during his address to the St. Catherine Municipal Corporation recently, including provisions that have been made for road repairs in constituencies across the island.
I made a commitment last year that each municipality will receive $25 million for roads. Now let me explain what this $25 million for roads is about. It is not to be chopped up and give one man 1,000, 1 million and one 3 million. It is intended to fix 3 or 4 good roads in the parish. And what does a good road entail? Sidewalk, curb and channel, and a decent road.
The minister also spoke about garbage collection, noting that it is not a favor being done by solid waste. However, he emphasized the role of citizens in ensuring garbage is disposed of properly.
I'm expecting that in your community meetings and in your group meetings and in your branch meetings, you will speak to your constituents about the role that they have to play to be decent and law-abiding citizens in the disposal of their solid waste.
With Jamaica officially entering the hurricane season, the minister spoke of a new approach to allocations to councillors in communities that may feel the effects of severe weather events.
And I have indicated from early that I do not intend to go the route that I did last year in making allocations right across the board to each councillor.
Joel Croskill, CVM Live.
And Minority Leader in the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation, the KSAMC, Andrew Swaby, says vendors of the Constant Spring Arcade have been treated unfairly. This, he says, after vendors disclosed their anxiety surrounding the plans of the KSAMC to demolish the Constant Spring Market, where they have worked for years. Here's Khadija Thomas, and she has this story.
I believe that we have not shown any sympathy or concern for the vendors.
Despite plans by the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation to demolish the Constant Spring Market, which is in keeping with stated regulations, Minority Leader Andrew Swaby says the vendors will be totally deprived of their livelihood.
To be fair to the Kingston St. Andrew Municipal Corporation, they have invited them for a meeting, which they turned up at the council. But the meeting was abruptly ended because a particular councillor came in the room and insisted that that meeting cannot be held or should not be held.
The Constant Spring Market is to be demolished to make way for a widened roadway, but Councillor Swaby says he's not aware of the design, but is certain that it will have an impact on the vendors.
I don't know if they'll be using all the spaces. I don't know if the Kingston St. Andrew Municipal Corporation have examined it to see if how can they be accommodated. I know that they have said to the vendors, not in a formal way, that they should look at the other markets in the municipality. We have to understand up to 40 years.
Swaby says these vendors will lose their clientele if they move to other locations. He says it would be better if they remain within proximity of the Constant Spring Market.
I believe also that we should talk to the vendors, show them the design of the road, and see what alternative measures can be arrived at. In fact, these persons are human beings just like anyone else.
Khadija Thomas for CVM Live.
Major investor in Jamaica, Mr. Michael Lee Chin, was a specially invited guest of the Jamaica Investment Forum 2018, where he delivered an assessment of Jamaica as an investment destination. Here's Joel Croskill again with the story.
At the Jamaica Investment Forum 2018, held at the Convention Centre in Montego Bay, potential investors in the island from overseas were treated to an audience with one of Jamaica's largest investors, Michael Lee Chin, who shared his formula for wealth creation.
Everybody who create wealth in the world did so by doing 5 things. Number 1, they own not too many, just a few high quality businesses, not too many. Number 2, they really understand them. Number 3, they make sure they're in strong long-term growth industries. Number 4, they use other people's money prudently. And number 5, their attitude is, I'm going to hold these few businesses for the long term. That's what they do. That's how wealth is created in the real world.
How do you get to use other people's money?
Borrow.
With substantial investments in NCB, Medical Associates, Kingston Wharves and CVM, among other things, Mr. Lee Chin spoke on the opportunities that exist in moments of crisis, such as were experienced during the FinSAC era.
Jamaica had a crisis, and whenever there's a crisis, there are two in fact, the Chinese definition of the word crisis has 2 components to it: danger plus opportunity. If you're living through the crisis, it's very easy to focus on the danger, and you can't see the forest for the trees. And if everybody's in that danger mode, no one wants to step up to the plate and buy. Therefore, prices are inexpensive. Therefore, the person who steps up to the plate can get great assets inexpensively. And by the way, Jamaica is still one of the best value investments anyone can make today.
Citing Jamaica's constitution as a great reassurance to investors in terms of its refusal to default on payments, Mr. Lee Chin assessed Jamaica for its investment opportunities.
Jamaica today is really a model for adherence and is a model student in terms of the IMF. We have seen primary surplus, or primary surplus is now 7%. We have a buoyant stock market. So we have come from a period of volatility, lack of confidence, to a period today of stability, predictability, and confidence. And all throughout this, there's one constant that was there. We had the confidence that the government would never default.
Joel Croskill, CVM Live.
It's now time for regional and international news.
Making regional news this evening. In Antigua and Barbuda, the Gaston Brown-led administration has dispelled as fake news a report that Venezuela will be discontinuing sale of petroleum products. The board of PetroCaribe has also come forward saying it is not ending and will not discontinue its special sale of petroleum products. According to the board, the fake news identified the 8 Organization of American States, OAS, that did not support the resolution to discontinue Venezuela's membership in the OAS. These member states are recipients of the PetroCaribe Agreement. Under the PetroCaribe Agreement, Venezuela sells petroleum to Central and Caribbean nations on favorable terms. The governor of the Cayman Islands, Anwar Chaudhry, has been suspended. He has been recalled to London, where he is currently under investigation as a result of complaints laid against him. This announcement was made by Cayman Islands Premier Aldin McCaukin. In the meantime, Deputy Governor Franz Manderson will act as governor of the islands. Meanwhile, on the international scene, the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says sanctions on North Korea will not be eased until it can demonstrate what he calls full denuclearization. But media reports from Pyongyang suggest a different timeline. Here's more from Al Jazeera.
After the hype of the summit with the sworn enemy came the explanation to the allies. America's top diplomat Mike Pompeo met with South Korean President Moon Jae-in in Seoul before a trilateral meeting with the foreign ministers of South Korea and Japan, which provided an opportunity to show unity on the issue of North Korea.
The U.S. alliances with these 2 countries are absolutely ironclad.
The declaration signed by US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Singapore was vague. There was no detail about how denuclearization will be achieved. North Korean state media suggested that the two leaders had agreed to simultaneous actions, suggesting Pyongyang could be rewarded along the way. Mike Pompeo says that's not the case.
The sanctions relief cannot take place until such time as we have demonstrated that North Korea has been completely denuclearized.
Despite not being told in advance, South Korea's foreign minister says Donald Trump's decision to unilaterally end joint military exercises wasn't discussed in detail in Thursday's meeting. North Korea believes the drills are a rehearsal for an invasion, but the United States and its allies have always said they're defensive. Japan says it's been assured by the US that their suspension is contingent on progress on denuclearization, but Tokyo is still concerned about the possible implications.
That's it for regional and international news on Thursday. I am Nicole Wilson. Good evening.
Well, those were the major stories. Later in the program, more news. News Live in 5 with Joel Cross.
Of course, it's your time of the evening, the panel discussion. So yesterday, if you were here with us, I'm sure you were, we had the Minister, Dr. Horace Chang, who is the Minister of National Security. And earlier in the week, he rolled out a raft of new initiatives, which he says will be effective in dealing with the criminal scourge and the violence which is plaguing our nation. We have a problem. So plans have been made in some quarters, and they've been met with skepticism, and a few areas some people feel a little bit of ambivalence, because some say we have heard these plans before, others are really amped up, especially those political affiliates, but we're going to speak the truth and speak it ever. So the minister appeared here with us on Wednesday, and he reinforced some of these ideas. Of course, we're going to dissect it, we're going to chop it up, we're going to cut it up, we're going to look at the practicality and the efficacy of these plans. So joining us, we have Mr. Peter Espew, political and social commentator. He represents, he's a political and social commentator, of course, John Mahfood, CEO, Jamaica Teas. We know him very well here. And we also know criminologist Jason Mackay. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us. Thanks, Ashley.
Well, let's start with you, Mr. Espew. No, we had Minister of National Security, Dr. Horace Chang, right here on set with us yesterday. He spoke to us one-on-one, one-on-two. Now, he says that there has been a call to action owing to this year-on-year increase in the murder rate, which stood at 23% at one stage at the beginning of this year. Now, he's saying that the government has responded to this call, and what we're seeing now is an 8% decline in major crime. But Dr. Chang went even further, gentlemen, and he said that it's the first time that we're seeing a national policy alignment with regard to criminal activity, getting rid of it. Do you believe that?
Well, national policy alignment, certainly what I heard him say and what I read in his intervention in the sectoral debate is that he's going to convert his ministry largely into, he's going to take on a community development focus. He might even call the Ministry of National Security and Community Development, because the first thing he says he wants to do is public order and enforcement, where he wants to, apply, the Road Traffic Act. He wants, generally citizen order, which will give the impression that, there's normalcy in the society. The second thing was dismantle and eliminate gangs. And he spoke about the alignment between criminals and people in the society. Of course, most of us say that it's the politicians who've been aligning themselves with criminals, and we have something called garrisons. I don't recall reading in his speech that he said he was going to dismantle garrisons, but if you read what he's saying, he says he's going to improve community, physical, social, and income-generating assets. He's going to work with unattached youth. He's going to go to music. What is it? MST, music, technology, and
science. No.
What's the S?
Well, I would believe it's science. No.
I know. I don't recall what it is. But basically, what he wants to do is to entice youth out of gangs by providing them with other income-generating activity. I'm skeptical because the amount of money that criminals make is quite large, and I don't know if the type of activities that the minister is proposing could the income that would come from that, or might come from that, would entice someone away from a life of crime where they're making tens of thousands of dollars.
Yes.
And so this, you know, when the ZOSO was introduced, which was the big news last year, you know, it's build, it's hold, clear, hold, and build. And I wrote in a column that clear and hold we've been doing for years. That's what a cordon and search is. That's what a state of emergency is. What was new about the ZOSO was the build.
Right.
But the resources for the clear and hold, the police and the soldiers, apparently is quite expensive.
Right.
And of course, a lot of personnel involved.
Right.
What I faulted it for, I said, I don't see the strategy for the build.
Right.
Which is in my field of work, which is sociology, social development. But what I read
Peter,
in the minister's speech
right,
is almost pure build. There are going to be these 20 communities across Jamaica that are
right,
where violence is. And they're going to do nothing but build,
you know, this
clear
is
and hold.
the perfect place to bring in Jason. Now, Jason is a big believer right here on CVM Live all the time in the zones of special operations and the states of emergency. Now, how do you respond to what Peter has just said, Jason, with regard to this? And how much money are we spending? We have an 8% decrease in major crime, but we have 2 ZOSOs, if not, is it 3 now?
2.
And we have 2 states of emergencies.
If we had 50 ZOSOs and 10 states of emergency and it saved more lives, I'd go for it. The type of killing that's going on, all that matters is the saving of lives. And if the ZOSO and the state of emergency is going to save lives, and an 8% reduction nationally, and far more than that in the zones where they actually are operating, then I'm good with it.
So you're saying that this is a good long-term strategy, and this is the government's answering the call of the Jamaican people to secure our society.
Except, Jason, they're not asking for more ZOSOs. They're not doing more ZOSOs. They're just doing the build part.
Well, they're saying I didn't get that from the debate. I got from the speech. What I got from the speech is that they plan to continue ZOSOing. Now, they also did push a lot into the social aspect of ZOSO. I like how ZOSO is conducted versus how curfews have traditionally been conducted. There is an almost overbearing effort to be pleasant and non-confrontational, and I think that is needed so that that social level of interaction between police and community exists. But again, everything goes down to me, is it saving lives? And if it's saving lives, I'm good with it. I know it may be expensive, but we find money to pay for a lot of other stuff.
So what was new in this speech for you, Jason?
Well, the restructuring of the JCF ratio to rank policy was new, where you're creating a lot of more ability, a greater ability for persons to move up within the organization. That should stop the hemorrhage of people leaving. That should make a lot of people in there more motivated. And I think that's a great thing.
You know, Jason, on that point, the minister was very clear that although the JCF will be restructured, the restructuring doesn't come with more money. In fact, some would say that we're actually bleeding money with these enhanced security measures, which were short-term solutions, but now long-term solutions.
But I thought the criticism was it was top-heavy. Too many assistant commissioners and deputy commissioners.
It's middle management largely. You know.
Yes, but he didn't say he was going to reduce the top.
But it's only about the figures you're speaking of, you know, you don't have 20 assistant and deputy put together. You know.
Let's bring in the man with the microscope. The man with the microscope, John Mahfood. Gentlemen, we're going to bring in Mr. John Mahfood, who I call the man with the microscope. Now, John, when you look at this presentation yesterday by Dr. Horace Chang, the Minister of National Security, what are you seeing? Are you impressed, like Jason is, with regard to the restructuring, or are you seeing something else totally? Are you seeing the levels of accountability of which you normally speak?
There were good ideas in what was presented, but it falls far short of what I call a comprehensive plan. I would have expected strong discussion on how it was going to be funded. That was absent, and we have the budget that was prepared earlier did not provide the funding that is going to make a big difference in crime reduction this year. There was no mention of targets and goals, and most importantly, there is no mention of monitoring and accountability. So there are ideas, but when do those ideas translate into action, and what happens if the action fails? That is missing, and it's always been missing from all the plans we have ever had presented, and that is going to cause this plan to fail. And in addition to that, there was an absence of stakeholder involvement. There was no opposition involved in this. There was no private sector involved in this plan. And there was no real social groups involved in this plan. And I think in the absence of those three things, it's doomed to fail.
Is that so, though, John? Because the minister said in his speech, right before concluding, that there is this renewed energy and alignment between the government and the private sector with regard to stamping out criminal activity in Jamaica.
Everybody is aligned with the idea of stamping out criminal activity, but I spoke to the private sector organization before I came down, and they were not consulted and involved in the construction of this plan. And I think while Jason is right about Zozo being an effective means and the state of emergency being an effective means of curtailing crime, number one, it's not a long-term strategy, and number two, the government cannot afford it in more than 2 locations at a time. When they rolled it out, it was supposed to be 19 divisions that were going to be impacted by Zozos. And unfortunately, they got stuck in 2. Then they had a state of emergency, and there is inadequate resources to roll it out further.
Okay, so Peter, how concerned?
And that's why I say they've abandoned this also, and the clear and the hold, and they're just doing the build, because they've announced that they're going to pick 20 communities, and they're going to do the build. They're going to have an integrated social intervention strategy and action plan. They're going to stimulate pro-social values, attitudes, and behavior, re-socialize antisocial mindsets. They're going to promote respect for self, others, and community. They're going to have social development, community cohesion, social inclusion. What it seems to me is that, as I said before, they're putting a lot of emphasis on the social intervention rather than the clear and the hold.
Right.
It's the build that he wants to expand. And in that sense, as I said before, this is social intervention. This is turning the Ministry of National Security into another Ministry of Community Development.
Jason, how concerned are you? You're hearing what Peter is saying. You've heard what John has said with regard to the fact that the extension of the states of emergency and the ZOSO's enhanced security measures are not accounted for financially within the budget, our national budget. Now, should we be concerned? Speak as a businessman.
The thing is, I don't know, and I don't think any of us here actually have a figure on the state of emergency and the cost of it. And I look on the state of emergency differently from most other people, and also, in the sense that my thing with it is the detention powers that it gives, and that is what causes the criminals to flee and lose their comfort zone.
It's the clear and the hold that you are interested in.
No, I am saying that I believe the detention is what causes it to be effective, because they flee rather than face the indefinite detention.
Which is the clear.
Well, we're looking at it from that standpoint, and I'm good with that. I mean, it stops the killing, and I'm great. No, they say a lot about the cost, but everybody who's working in these zones are salaried workers, whether they're in that zone or they're not in that zone. So I see of it more as a movement of resources from one section to the other, but not necessarily something that should incur significant salaried costs.
John,
that's from a business standpoint.
From a business standpoint, do you agree with what Jason is saying?
From a salaried standpoint.
Well, let me give you a stark reality. We did a housing development in Yalas, and I approached the Yalas police station to talk about how they're going to protect those folks in the development that we did. And I was told, we are in charge of 30 communities, and we have 30 policemen and 1 motor vehicle. The other 200 police stations around Jamaica are facing the same deficit of equipment and resources, and all of it right now is focused on this little Zozo, on this little state of emergency, and they don't have the resources to put to the rest of the country. And so all they're doing is curtailing crime in St. James, and it has not changed. Murders have not changed in the rest of the country.
That's not what the statistics are saying.
That's not going to take us to the point where crime in Jamaica is not 45 and 50 per 100,000, but down to a level that will cause people to want to come
I have to
Jamaica.
disagree with Jason. He says that there won't be any new staff. But if the Ministry of National Security is going to be doing all of this social intervention, it doesn't have that kind of staff. It has the policemen like at Yalos and elsewhere. If they're going to get involved in all of this community development, they're going to have to hire, maybe, I'm not complaining, you know, this is my trade. A lot of sociologists like me, it's going to obviously require the hiring of a lot of community development specialists and so on, which are not presently on the government establishment, which is why I'm skeptical. I don't see how this, if it is a crime plan, can be implemented without severe employment of people who will do what the minister says he wants to do.
But Peter, on the face of it, is this going to throw our budget out of whack?
Well, I don't know, because you know, is he saying that he's going to use the Social Development Commission to do it? But then is the Minister of National Security the one to announce this? Or should it be the minister who is responsible for the SDC? If he says he's going to do the training of the Marine Police at Maritime, and he's going to train other police up at Monique, then you know, this comes on in the Ministry of Education.
Right.
You know, I like the idea of changing the police force to a police service. He keeps stripping back and calling it force. You know, he forgets.
So that's unclear.
That's here. But at the same time, he says he's going to, it is going to be a change of name, he says, and he is going to weed out the bad cops out of the system.
You know, Jason, I know you have some comments. I'm going to allow you a chance to give those comments. But gentlemen, right after Jason is finished with his final comments, I'm going to ask you all individually to rate very succinctly the presentation made in Parliament by the Minister of National Security, Dr. Horace Chang, and what your expectations are going to be based on his presentation this week. Jason.
Well, despite me liking aspects of the plan, there are things that I still feel that with the emergency circumstances that now surround us in this country, with how people are being killed, I mean, in the corporate area, those brazen murders that took place at Mayfair Hotel and Terra Nova Hotel, where this is far from the darkness that normally would highlight crime. You know, you could hide in it. This is we're literally killing anywhere the damn well pleased to kill. I think that at this point, I would like to see a more combative plan to really take it to the streets, to take it to the criminals, because this is like a Gestapo operating against the government, against the country. So that is the part of the plan I didn't like. I want to see a more let's go get them plan.
Okay.
But there are things I liked, and I liked the changes in the JCF ratio. I like the fact that they were bringing the Americans to bear over the guns that are coming from their country, and the fact that we are fined when our ganja goes there. What is the pro-co? Are they going to be fined when their guns come here? Things like that I like.
But Jason says that most of the guns come from the U.S. But then he says, but that's what he says. But then he says, but we found Glocks, Uzis, AK-47s. Glocks come from Sweden, AK-47s from Russia, and Uzis come from Israel.
That's an interesting point. And we have to have an entirely different debate on guns for drugs and guns for trade. So, John, your comments finally. How would you rate this speech, and what are you expecting and anticipating coming out of it?
I give it a total failing grade, 1 out of 10. It cannot succeed, and we have to remember, we are going from we are complacent in the murder rate in Jamaica. 1,500 people a year. It has to be a plan so massive and monumental that it takes us down to 100. This is not going to do it.
Thank you, John. Peter, succinctly, final comments.
I like the analysis that he, in the early part of his talk, where he says that we need a culture of nonviolence and so forth. It's a very sociological presentation.
Yes.
And therefore, I will have to give him probably 8 out of 10 for the analysis.
Yes.
But I can only give him about 4 out of 10 for the actual plan itself.
Thank you so much.
Because there's so little detail.
Thank you so much, Peter. Lacking detail. Jason, I know you just have to give a figure. No.
Well, for the analysis.